All right, so here we are, 2 weeks until Election Day. Everything has to happen now. After years of campaigning, even though we've switched a candidate on the Democratic side, we are finally to the home stretch of the home stretch of the home stretch where all the ballots are going to start coming in now. And there have been some states that look bad for Democrats, good for Democrats. But today we're going to look at some of the battleground states. We're going to talk about them. We're going to look at the Nowcast models that I have for most of the battleground states to see what's going on. Yesterday, Texas started in-person early voting. We got some numbers from there, but not all the numbers from there, and we'll talk about that as well. Florida started in-person early voting as well, and it went horribly for the Democrats, so that's something we'll talk about, and just see where all the other states are. Today, I thought it was yesterday, but today, Wisconsin starts in-person early voting, so we won't have the numbers for those today, but tomorrow it'll be interesting to see how the Nowcast models and other things change. So let's go ahead and delve into the numbers right now, starting with Arizona. All right, so you can see in Arizona we're at 12.24% turnout, and the geographical accuracy of the model is at 0.98, so that is looking really good. Most of our models should be like this. As you can see in 2022, 41% of the electorate was early votes. We'll see if that still happens. We might get a little bit higher than that, but if we look at the current projection from the Nowcast, basically saying if the election were to end at this moment, right now, what could we project based on where the vote comes from and who has voted, how that vote would break out? And as you can see, the Republicans are slightly ahead, but this margin is getting closer and closer, actually quite quickly. In the next few days, we might see this thing absolutely neck and neck, but just in going from 12 to 12.24, the Democrats took a big chunk. So this is a state that's starting to look a little bit better for Democrats, and we'll see how it goes in the next day or two. Now, as I mentioned, the Florida situation is getting worse. So if you remember the old Nowcast models, Florida had the Democrats ahead in the state, but now, as you can see, we've had a major flip. So if we look at the turnout, it's now at 13.12%. That's of last night. There's obviously been more votes coming in right now. Geographical accuracy isn't that great, and some of those are more Democratic counties, so we will see some more Democratic votes in there. But as you can see, the Democrats projected based on the votes that have come in and where they have come from, the Republicans are now ahead 845,000 to roughly about 800,000. They just crept ahead yesterday. And indications are from this morning's numbers that that gap is just going to get bigger and bigger. I did a whole entire video about Florida, and we should even consider it a swing state anymore. Go ahead and check that out. All right, if you look at the Georgia Nowcast model, it is continuing to be bad for the Democrats. But now, and this is where we really do have an issue, we're at 23.85% turnout as of this morning. This does not update the new numbers. The early numbers this morning got a tiny bit more Democratic, so shows a little bit of a glimmer of hope possibly there. The geographical accuracy is good. And in 2022, 64% of the vote actually voted early pre-election day votes. So use that for a yardstick of what we might see here. And we're already 1/3 of what the turnout is. Georgia is a real bad turnout state, just like Michigan. But as we can see right now, the Republicans are almost at a 100,000 vote gap when it comes to the current projection based on the Nowcast model. If the election were to end right now with the 23.85% that we have, and we look at the geographical distribution of those and see how they've done historically, the Republicans are looking much better. But as I said this morning, just a little bit of numbers that came in did help the Democrats quite a bit. I did a video about our Democrats changing their voting method. They might be in Georgia, which might make this a lot closer state in the last few days of early in-person voting. That's just an assumption. We got to wait to see if that happens. But it's a little bit hard right now to see how Georgia goes Democratic. If we look at Michigan, this hasn't changed from the last model we had. So if you saw the last video with this model, this is essentially the same, but it is a very accurate geographical model with a 12.19% turnout rate. And we see the Democrats up quite a bit, 530,000 votes to 458,000 for the Republicans. Michigan looks like a good state right now. The actual in-person voting is not until a few days from now, so we'll see once those numbers come in if there's a drastic shift. But as of right now, with this turnout rate, it does look better. And remember, Michigan has changed some of their laws regarding early voting, so that might actually increase the early vote numbers. If we look at North Carolina, they're at exactly 18% turnout as of right now, and the Democrats are slightly up. So you see just a little bit less than 2,000 votes. But one thing we can say about North Carolina, if we are seeing this changing dynamic where in-person early voting in other states are very heavily favoring the Republicans, we can see that possibly here that it is pretty even. The Republicans did have a little bit of a bump in that first day, or at least they made the overall vote composition even throughout the state, but now the Democrats nor the Republicans are really pulling away. They're both neck and neck with early voting. Now, if you look at previous voting trends, when it comes to the state of North Carolina, you would expect this early in-person voting to be a little bit more Democratic. But again, we can be in changing times with less vote by mail or more people voting on Election Day. We'll just see what happens. And if you look at the current vote composition in North Carolina, you can see just how close it is. 35% of those who have turned out now are Democrats, 33.6% are Republicans, and 31.4% are independents. That Republican number has gone down, essentially since yesterday, that Republican number has gone down 0.1, and the independent number has gone up 0.1. That's how little of a shift that we're seeing. But the fact that all these numbers are even is actually a good sign for Democrats. You don't have Republicans running away with the in-person early vote like you see in other states like Florida. Now, if we look at the Pennsylvania Nowcast model, as I've mentioned, this one can be a little bit different because not as many people are going to vote early. So we do have to look at this compared to previous numbers. But again, we also might be seeing a big shift in the vote. That 23% of the vote composition in 2022, it looks like we're going to break that record, which means we might have a lot more Republicans actually voting early, and the composition of the vote might actually be higher. That are those that are vote by mail votes or handing in your mail-in ballot. But as of right now, of those votes that have been cast, the Democrats do have a lead, but obviously you have to take this with a grain of salt, mostly due to the fact that this is an election day state. So we really have to see what happens on election day. But the more votes that you can bank right now to get to your win number, the better position you're in. So now we come to Texas, and Texas has now banked a number of votes. We're at 4.44%. So we are actually doing quite well. We're going to start getting more numbers. But you can see that the Republicans are up. Now, if you look at the geographical accuracy of the model that we have right now, it is low. It's not at the 0.95 or higher that I like. It's at the 0.7036. And the reason why is you have some counties, particularly Dallas County, who have not reported or reported very little in-person voting numbers. And apparently Dallas County broke a record yesterday, like we're hearing throughout the United States. Dallas County being a very strong Democratic county, a very large county as well, that's going to impact the numbers drastically. So hopefully tomorrow, when we get all the counties and we get a little bit of an idea what the state looks like as a whole, instead of some of the counties missing, especially Dallas County, we'll get a better idea. Essentially, the numbers as far as the percentage or the likelihood for the Republicans to win hasn't changed, but once we start putting those more Democratic counties in there, especially Dallas, that number could change, maybe not drastically, but a little bit in the next model. And if that number keeps chipping away, then we can start seeing the state get closer. So unlike a state like Florida, where we're actually going to see the Republicans probably increase their lead more and more and more, we might see Texas actually decrease the lead over time. We just need to get that data in. All right, so now we're at Wisconsin right now, and we have 10.14% of registered voters who have turned out. The geographical accuracy of the model is good, and the Democrats are ahead. And actually, because Wisconsin is more of a straight ticket state, we do see that the Democrats are performing quite well. Now, today, once those numbers come in from early in-person voting, these numbers might change totally, but Going into the day, the Democrats are in a very, very strong position, and both Michigan and Wisconsin, as far as the vote by mail numbers, look very strong for the Democrats. We just have to see what happens with the in-person voting, especially in a state where back in 2022, 80% of the votes cast were early votes, early pre-election day votes. So that means this early in-person vote is going to be a huge number probably of what we see. So unfortunately in Texas, we don't have Dallas County, and that actually kind of skews things quite a bit. When that comes in and we get the numbers come in tonight or maybe tomorrow morning, we might have a clearer picture of what Texas looks like right now. Now, as far as the Electoral College map, if you saw me do the video yesterday, that just hasn't really changed. There hasn't been much of a dynamic or huge shift. Georgia is still kind of a worry spot for Democrats because of where those votes have come from, are very Republican. Forsyth County still turning out well. The Metro Atlanta area for the Democrats has gotten better. And I mentioned that in the video before. I mentioned that in the live stream as well. But the other counties, when we look at Chatham County, Richmond County, Bibb County, Muskogee County, these smaller counties, not in the Metro Atlanta area, but like significant counties for the Democrats, they're still, their turnout rates are really, really low. This is what's killing Democrats right now. If those counties don't turn up, when we're talking about a state that it could just be a few hundred or a few thousand votes, those counties not turning out could be what makes the difference, especially if the Metro Atlanta counties, they start doing their things and their turnout numbers, DeKalb, Gwinnett somewhat, Cobb, they're looking better than they did a few days ago. So there is some trend happening there. As far as Florida, it looks bad. I mean, it just looks real bad in Florida. These early vote numbers are just really sinking the Democrats. There's hardly any vote by mail when it comes to the state. It looks really, really, really bad. I don't know where the Democrats are. Hopefully they'll be able to get a few more ballots. But as I mentioned in my video, we really have to consider Florida a deep red state at this point. While the margin might be a little bit closer, it just comes to the point where the Democrats can't win. But if we go ahead and look at the governor's races in Florida and in some really big blue states, we can see that Ron DeSantis in the last election actually performed better than a lot of incumbent Democratic governors in Democratic states. That might give us an indication as to how much Florida is actually shifting. But I wanted to put it in here because a lot of people have been talking about Florida. I just think now it's an absolute lost cause. As with Ohio, unfortunately, some of the numbers that have come out of there just don't look good anymore. They're not really doing well. But that doesn't mean that Sherrod Brown will lose. His race is kind of totally different. You do have a lot of split ticket voters there that are going to be Sherrod Brown Trump voters, interestingly enough, which is something Democrats might want to look into as to why those voters exist. But the other states really haven't changed too much. The blue wall in the north, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, so far look pretty good. Arizona is getting better for the Democrats. Now, I haven't mentioned Nevada yet, but it does seem like the numbers have gotten a little bit closer between Democrats and Republicans in Nevada. But when it comes to non-party affiliates, especially in Clark County, they can break more to the Democrats. So we can't just look at what Democrats or Republicans are doing there. You have to factor in the non-party affiliated voters, especially in a state like Nevada. And overall, Arizona, it's starting to get a little bit more Democratic. So it does seem like it's creeping that way. Let's see the next few days. There could be some big shifts. We'll see. But overall, yeah, I think things are starting to get a little bit more solidified. Still worried about Georgia, but the other swing states that we're talking about, Democrats are at least holding their own. All right, so thank you all very much for joining me in today's video. I will see you in the next one. Have a wonderful day wherever it is you are, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.